first thing I want to ask is, I just glanced at my bookshelf behind me here and thought, which one book would I pull off the shelf if I wanted to recommend a book to an aspiring police chief? Or I actually occasionally will pull a book off my shelf and give it to one of my detectives or patrol officers when they're in the office chatting, and they say, well, Chief, what do you think about this? And I find much greater success pulling a book off the shelf and saying, what I think about that was largely informed by what I read in this book. Why don't we do this? Would you take this book and then walk down the hall and schedule with my executive assistant time 4 weeks from now and come back and let's spend a half an hour together, because I'd really like to have a discussion with you and not just tell you what I think. So if we could, Don, what one book, I see you've got a bookshelf there behind you. What one book over your career would you pull down off the shelf and say, okay, this is the book on leadership that I think that you would benefit from reading?
Yeah, so I totally believe that you have to be a lifelong learner, right? So lots of books, things like that. I will tell you, I don't know if this is my favorite necessarily book, but hot off the shelf right now, this is big for me, is When Everyone Leaves, the Toughest Challenges Get Seen and Get Solved. This was written by a gentleman out of Kansas at a leadership institute, but right now that has been given to all our supervisors. We have picked the 4 kind of main points out of that book and have gone over those. So I think there's times when different books come up. I've kind of given assignments out before for the Fred factor and things like that. But this book right here, like I tell my people, when I read the title of it, I really don't need to open up the book, because this is pretty concise about what our mission is for everybody to step up and be a leader. So right now, I think that is hot on my list. And then on my kind of table back there, it's not a book, but if people haven't watched the series Ted Lasso, there are so many leadership lessons in that. You could probably actually build a full day PowerPoint training class on all the leadership lessons in Ted Lasso. So those are my top 2 things right now that I'm pushing out to my staff.
Now, Don, I've never watched Ted Lasso, but just yesterday, one of my young officers said, Chief, man, you remind me so, and he says, you got to watch this show. So I'm going to have to.
It's amazing.
You know what you're doing this weekend.
Yeah, there you go. Bill, what would be your pick? What's the book you would pull off the shelf and recommend to an aspiring police chief or an aspiring leader?
It's like trying to pick your favorite child. Because I don't think there's, kind of like Don was saying, it's continuous learning, and I don't think there's any one book that is a leadership book. I love reading all different perspectives. Military perspective, law enforcement perspective, public, business perspective. Leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter if you're in public safety or outside of public safety. Leadership at a certain level, transcends all those borders. I'm a big John Maxwell fan. He has a whole series of books on leadership that I find really helpful. And to be on point with this topic for today, the first 100 days, Michael Watkins has a great book called The First 90 Days. And it is more focused on the business world, but again, leadership transcends all those boundaries. It's a great book for anybody that's looking to either move into an agency and take a leadership job as a chief, or maybe come in as a command level person from an outside agency, or even if you're moving up within, if you're gonna promote up through the ranks and you're gonna take over a lieutenant's position, or you're gonna run a different division or something like that. Get great information. So First 90 Days by Michael Watkins is, I would say, for today on this topic, that would be my book.
Great, thank you. Stacy?
I just finished reading a book. It's called It's Your Ship, and it's by Captain Michael Brashoff, U.S. Navy, and it struck me in a way because I don't believe I'm a micromanager, but I also want to make sure everything's being done. And so I ask a lot of questions and I want to make sure staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're all accountable. But it really, it lets you kind of step back and say, there are people in this organization who can run this organization really with or without me. So it gave me a perspective of being more open, delegating more, listening more, allowing staff to make decisions and trying new things. And so really for me, that kind of was a little bit of an eye opener for me. I think it helped me kind of step back and let others do.
Great. Thank you. And that book actually is behind me on the shelf. Harry Truman once said that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. And I'm sure you have seen you've seen top 10 book lists by different leaders and successful business people. I don't think that it's a coincidence that any great leader really prioritizes professional reading and professional development and training. I really don't. No sheriff, no police chief, no executive wakes up one day with all of the knowledge required to be successful. I think most great leaders are just insatiable readers because they're constantly pursuing knowledge and personal development, and it can be a challenge, I think, as a chief. You may think, oh well, I don't really need to go do that training. Although again, I think it's important to be present with your officers. So I'll wrap up this question by telling you that I'm like the rest of you. I couldn't just pick one, and I'm not going to. They're a pair. They go together. And these are the only books, other than perhaps scripture, that I have read multiple times. And that is Leadership and Self-Deception, paired with The Anatomy of Peace. Those two books have made a greater impact on how I lead and how I treat people, and help me really understand that you matter like I matter, and really advanced and helped how I treat my officers, and in reverse, how my officers treat me, and more importantly, how my officers interact with the public.